And I believe at this point, the fights are going to go to intermission, so you're going to be stuck here with me and Leslie Smith for a little bit. And Leslie, we have had some tremendous fights, and every fight has been finished. We haven't seen any decisions yet here tonight. But what we have seen are some debuters that looked pretty good, got caught, can happen. We've seen some veterans come back and continue their win streaks, as we just saw with Angel Deanda, 5-0 coming into the fight. And as you said, he'll move to 6-0, and he's beat some great fighters, and he just beat another one tonight. Mike Morales was firing back, and I actually thought that Morales weathered that early storm really well and looked like he was going to do some damage, but he just got caught.
That was a really well-made fight. The matchmaker did an amazing job on that fight, because that was one of the most entertaining fights. And I'll admit that I was kind of wondering about it. What would the 5-fight winning streak that Deanda was coming in with, and Morales not having that?
Absolutely. And earlier on, I don't know if you guys were tuned in or not, but we had the debut of Mohammed Usman, whose brother won the Ultimate Fighter and is on a huge win streak in the UFC. He's undefeated, and Usman made his debut here tonight. The guy looks like he should be a professional vigilante. I mean, he has put together standout football player at Arizona, played for the Wildcats, went on to play a little bit for the San Diego Chargers, did some time on the practice squad, and he said, I want to move to MMA, and he told me, look, I'm a professional athlete. I can make this transition, and tonight he did, and he finished his opponent very quickly. We thought it was going to be strikes, but it was a submission.
I thought it was going to be strikes. I've heard that for football players that they do a lot of wrestling drills, because that's what blocking someone and taking them, it's a takedown. But I had anticipated that it was going to be a bunch of strikes, because that's what people usually do when they get their very first fight. They come in and they're just excited to wing it and move around and get that feeling in the shoulders. And he looked like a veteran inside of there. He came in, he got the takedown, he moved to side control, and then he got that Kimura, and it was well done.
Absolutely, and it's another thing. Not only did they use the wrestling in the football, but he told me he has a wrestling background. So he did do some amateur wrestling, and that showed a little bit. And then after that fight, we moved on to Jalen Turner, the Tarantula, and it was his birthday, by the way, and he took on Paradise Valvasa, and that was another great fight.
Yeah, that was awesome. What a great present for himself on his birthday to be able to come out and do that.
Technical knockout.
Yeah, beautiful. He did a great job of using his length. That was a big thing in that fight, was he used his length.
Sharp knees.
Oh, man, and those knees. The one knee that he got to the head, and that weakened Paradise in the first place, and then followed that up with another knee to the body, and that was the one that actually ended it, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because he got hit with that big knee to the head, but that didn't finish the fight. But when he took that big one to the midsection, I mean, and a lot of guys don't understand, when you get hit down there in the boiler, you get hit in the chest, the sternum area, it can end you quick, and it did.
You know what they say is that you get hit in the head, you get a KO in the head, and you go to heaven. But when you get hit in the body, you go to hell.
Absolutely. So, and then don't forget, later on tonight, we have some tremendous fights coming up. In fact, right after this intermission, we are going to see Nathan Stolen taking on Tyler Diamond, and that should be another tremendous fight. And I'm going to tell you something. Every fight coming up is going to be great, but the main event, and we'll get there in a second. I don't want to gloss over any of these fights, but Tyler Diamond is 7-0. Nathan Stolen is 6-0. I want to point that out. So you got 13 wins between these two guys, no defeat. So someone's O is going to go tonight, and this could be the best fight of the night. I mean, we are looking at a fight of the night candidate when you've got two guys that are 6-0 and 7-0 doing battle in the TPF cage.
Totally. It's always fun to get to see the mindset of people who have never lost.
Right.
And see how that plays out, how they add that into their game plan, how it just changes things to know that it is not a possibility to lose.
Absolutely, and let's talk a little bit about somebody that you know well. She's in your division in the UFC, Ronda Rousey. When she was undefeated, it was a different story. Once she got beat, it literally changed her entire life. Now, we're not going to say that's going to happen to Nathan Stolen or Tyler Diamond, but what I want to see is whoever does lose, how do they bounce back from that? Because it's real easy to walk around and be real happy when you've never lost a fight. But at some point tonight, one of these guys is going to walk out of here with a loss, and it's a shame, but it's got to happen eventually.
We say it's a shame. Everybody wants to be undefeated, but you got to fight in order to be undefeated. And the most important thing is usually going to be to get the experience and to learn from whatever goes on. This is MMA. People don't stay undefeated forever.
Right.
And so dealing with that loss and standing back up, you get knocked down 7 times and you get back up 8 times, and that's really what champions are made of.
Absolutely. So we'll find out what happens in that battle of 2 undefeated fighters a little bit later on. And right after that, we're going to see the heavyweights again. Van Palacio, who's 3-1, is going to take on Chris Lewis, who's undefeated at 1-0 out of Fresno, California. And I think that's going to be another big fight. And we've got these heavyweights. And the first heavyweight fight, we didn't see a lot of strikes. Maybe we'll see some in this one, Leslie.
Yeah, totally.
Van Palacio, for his part, 6'1" tall. He's had 2 no contests in his career, which is very rare when you've only had, 6 fights. So that's going to be pretty good. But he's got 3 wins and a draw in his last 4 fights, so that should be good there. Chris Lewis, for his part, made his debut at Bellator and won his fight.
And he, got a TKO with 2 seconds left to go in the first round.
We talk about making your debut here at Tachi Palace, which is huge. To make your debut on television at Bellator, either one of these places. So he goes from Bellator to Tachi Palace. He hasn't really had to work his way up just yet. He's starting sort of at the top.
Yeah, which is a great feeling, and that contributes a lot to the confidence of being able to walk in. And we were talking about being undefeated before. And granted, there's a difference between being 6-0 and being 1-0.
Right.
But
a big difference.
There's still a lot of confidence that comes from walking inside the cage and knowing that nobody has ever handed you a defeat.
Absolutely. And then we move on to the main event portions of the evening. We got our co-main event, Randall Wallace from Oakdale, California. We saw Last Stand Fight Team a little bit earlier on. We're going to see them again when they bring out Randall Wallace, who's 13-6. You may have heard him as Buddy Wallace. I think he's wanting to lean a little bit more toward Randall now. And that's the co-main event in the welterweight division as he takes on another red-hot guy, JC Yamas. And Yamas is well-known out here as well, and that is going to be that could have been the main event.
His name is the Leg Lock Monster, and I'm very excited to see some leg games. I haven't gotten to see any leg action tonight, and I'm a huge fan of the leg action.
Yeah, so we're going to see that fight, and then we move to the main event, and this is the one that everybody's been talking about. You've got Cody Gibson, who's a UFC veteran. He is the current Tachi Palace Bantamweight Champion of the world, and now he is going to look to add a belt to that collection as he takes on the streaking Adrian Diaz, who is the current Tachi Palace Featherweight Champion, and that's the belt that's on the line. Let's keep that in mind. It is champion versus champion, but only one belt on the line. That's the featherweight belt of Adrian Diaz.
I like what Cody Gibson's doing. I like how he's like, look, I already have this belt. I think I can take that one too. He has not lost since he left the UFC.
Absolutely, and I got to tell you, it hits a little close to home with me. Back when Nick Diaz did war a couple years back, he fought my cousin, Darren Whitey Cooley, who's just a beast, black belt under Cesar Gracie, and Cody put it on him, and at that moment I said, this kid's for real, and he's going to go somewhere, and he did. He went directly to the UFC, and as you said, since leaving the UFC, he hasn't lost a fight.
Adrian Diaz, his last fight was in March, and that was a win. He's on a 2-fight win streak right now. I think it was a great matchup. I'm anticipating watching a great fight. Absolutely.
Diaz won 5 of his last 6 fights, and that's going to be a hell of a fight, so stick around on SureDog.com for that. All right, so let's go back and take a look at a little bit of the highlights, Leslie, that we saw earlier on in the show for our first 5 fights of the evening. And there you saw the junior ROTC color guard, and here comes the Alpha Wolf. And you saw Usman there, and there's the Niners, and that was the tarantula there. And this was a great fight, and as we said, the story of this fight was the knees, and there's that body knee that ended that fight.
And he was on the ground for a minute after that. Those body shots are painful.
Absolutely, as you saw Jalen Turner on his birthday win his fight, and there you see Alex Rojas and your teammate Joe Neal. And Joe Neal put on a striking clinic. Rojas did his best to try to counterpunch, but he never quite found the answer, and that big uppercut was the story of that fight, Leslie.
Man, and Joe did not hesitate. He landed, he was like, if someone isn't holding me back, I am on that man. And that's exactly what he did. He raced in, and he just kept on landing.
Absolutely, and there we saw the debut of Diamond Templeton, and he did the best he could, but the transition submission game of his opponent, Armando Espinoza, was just a little bit too much for him, and he ends up finishing it with a triangle.
Yeah, Espinoza was good with those.
And this is Angel Deanda and Mike Morales, and Deanda ends up landing a huge right hand right there, right on the button. Mouth open, as Leslie said. Down goes his opponent, and Mark Raleigh calls a stop to the contest. And Angel Deanda wins the final fight before intermission, live from Tachi Palace.